Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy reporting live from my little cabin in the woods here at Murphy's Law in East Texas. And we have a special guest tonight that is in Boston, Massachusetts. And when I first heard his voice, people always remark about how we talk in Texas, but there's nothing like a Boston accent. So welcome, Steve
Thank
Manchester.
you,
Tell
Kathy.
us all about yourself and your book, and then we'll come to you, TK, in just a bit.
Thank you, Kathy. It's such an honor to be here. I really, really appreciate it. And having the menu as the selection for the December Pulpwood Queens, book of the month, I'm beyond honored. I really am. I'm thrilled by it. So thank you for that. So Steve Manchester, I've been writing for about 30 years. I've written 17 books. I have seven national bestsellers. And I think the cool part of my story is when I was a kid, my grandfather was an amazing storyteller, right? And up in Boston, we actually live about 50 miles south of Boston, but real blue collar, like salt of the earth type of person. And his nickname was Swamp Yankee, right? But he could spin a yarn like unbelievable. Like and not to be cliche about this, but if you sat at the foot of his rocking chair, right, he'd make you laugh, cry. I couldn't tell the difference between fact, fiction. I didn't care, right, what was real or not, but he really could tell a story. I didn't realize back then that he had planted a seed in me and that I wanted to be a storyteller too, right? So there are writers and there are people that are really mechanical. I love a good story, whether or not you're verbalizing that or putting it down on paper. So fast forward 20 years, I have a young career in law enforcement. I ended up getting sent to Operation Desert Storm in Iraq, and I was a sergeant, a squad leader in a military police unit. And we were stationed in Saudi Arabia. Just as the ground war started, we came through the breach. Without getting into the graphic detail, Saddam Hussein swore it would take us 6 months, the Americans 6 months to get through the breach. It actually took about 17 minutes. And it was, a very short period of time, but it was surreal. And it was incredible to see that type of carnage and that brutality, right? And at the time I was 23 years old, which is considered an old man. I was serving with people that were 18, 19 years old. But the crux of the story is, and this is kind of, sometimes the lowest point in your life becomes the greatest turning point, right? And for me, I'm coming from Iraq into Saudi Arabia with my platoon sergeant. We hit a dust storm. And within this blinding dust storm, I hit a boulder with the right front tire of the Humvee, and I spun that thing end over end and crushed the roof. I was thrown from the vehicle. Make an incredibly long story short, we were abandoned for about 3 hours. The antenna was buried into the Humvee. I couldn't call for help. And it was getting dark. The Iraqis were coming out at night the same way that we used to come out at night, right, looking for them. So clearly a lot of prayers. But I remember thinking, not if, but when I get home, I'm going to chase my dream down. I'm going to become a storyteller, because if this is my one life, then I really honestly need to make the most of that life, right? Even if the rejection rate for success is 97%, I'm going to take a shot at it. And I ended up coming home. I went back to school to finish my degree in law enforcement. I became an investigator in the prison system. And then it took me a couple of years. I finally kept that promise to myself, and I've been writing for about 30 years. And basically the underlying theme for all of my books is you're never alone, not ever. And being in that desert for 3 hours, it was the first time in my life that I ever felt truly alone, almost like a small child who had lost his parents, right, in the mall. And if my work, when people read my stuff, because it's very emotionally charged and it's reality based, if you feel as if you're not alone, that you can feel the connection with me, then I did my job. And that's really my mission for the rest of my life, truly.
That's an incredible story. I mean, and the storytelling thing about your grandfather, my grandfather's family was from Boston. They were the Maloney's.
Wow.
Maloney.
Wow.
Yeah. So he used to sing a song. Maybe you know this. How many miles to Boston town? Score and 10. Do you know it?
I don't. I'm sorry. No.
Well, I remember singing that song, and I never knew until I was, into my late 30s that he was from there when I started doing my genealogy and everything. So
That's fantastic.
I had no idea. So there's that weird connection, but Boston of all places, and I've never been there. I'll have to go. But I'm thrilled with 30 years of writing, and I love the message that you're telling everybody that you're not alone, because I think most authors that I've interviewed through the 20, now almost 21 years, they all tell me that they would write the story whether they would get paid or not, because they just have a story burning in them, and they play it out in their mind as they're driving in their car and doing all these different things. So that's very interesting. That now, was there anybody else in your family that was storytellers?
Yeah, actually, well, if you come to my house, around the holidays, right? I'll use Christmas, right? I mean, you seated at my dining room table, you're definitely going to receive a gift. You get a present that you can unwrap. But the true gift is when you sit at my table, you're going to listen to storyteller after storyteller, and the expectation is that you share one as well. And what I love about that is, my father passed away 2 years ago, and we're still telling his stories, right? And I still tell the stories of my grandfather, and it's basically that passing, that legacy, which means a great deal to me. My last name means something to me. The stories that bring my family to where we are today mean a great deal to me, and it's also a way for me to teach my children and hopefully their children that there's a certain responsibility, right, that we have to our ancestors, and it seems as if each generation is doing a little bit better than the one before it, which should be the case. But people had to pave that road, right? So let's show some respect and gratitude for that. So the storytelling is, throughout my family.
Well, you are, you have this background in law enforcement, and then our TK Thorne also has a background in law enforcement. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't.
But
That's
you have a
fantastic.
connection. I'm sure you can talk about stories there in Birmingham. And
lots of stories.
lots of stories. In fact, she just got announced today. Your next book is out in your series, right? About your book coming out.
Yes.
Yeah. So
House of Stone.
Congratulations.
we'll have to get together, and that's exciting news. But we have all authors here tonight: Robert Gwaltney and Patricia Sands. And you know what? I love it because authors, we support each other, don't we?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I love about the Pulpwood Queens during this time of COVID. The authors have rallied, man, but we're up getting close to 1,000 new members, you all. So we're building well, Mandy and I had a come to Jesus moment about membership. Now that's my livelihood. And then it's like you said, Steve, what's more important to you, making the money or doing what you love? And I thought, I do not want to see this book club wither away. And COVID has kept so many people away that starting December 1st, we've made all reader membership free, so that authors will have support. And people just jumped on within just a short period of time. We had 500. We're climbing the charts, and we're going to have a full girlfriend weekend. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited that Steve's going to be there, because last year he won a contest. He was telling a story, and I listened to those stories, and I thought, they deserve to come this year on me. So Steve will be there, and I'm thrilled about that.
I appreciate that.
Well, I want you now to tell us about what you've been doing just recently. What's come about with this Thursday? It's called Thursday Night.
The Thursday Night Club, yeah. So I love this story because, 5 or 6 years ago, my wife and I, we love to go to Martha's Vineyard. I don't know if anybody's ever been to the vineyard, but, really small, quaint, not really great cell service. So it's 1952 when you get there, right? The kids can't access their phones. It's phenomenal. Bicycle built for two, you know what I mean? Sand on the side of the roads, the whole deal. Long story short, we rented a house from a friend from Saturday to Saturday, but could not get the car over on the ferry on Saturday. There were no openings, and literally you have to book, months in advance. So we had an opening on Friday, which means I don't have a place to sleep. And I'm thinking, well, I was much younger, but I've slept in cars before, right? So I'll take the car over. I'll meet you guys at the ferry. I ended up coming over on the ferry, and I parked at in Oak Bluffs, and basically I had all my stuff with me, and I wrote for 14 hours. And the funny part of the story is, we're talking about late July, early August, whenever it was. Kids are flying kites. You can feel the sea breeze. I mean, it's really the best place to write a story about summer in New England. And I ended up writing a Christmas story, which for whatever reason, it's just, you know what I mean? But I didn't think too much of it. Kind of love the concept. 5 college kids, senior year of college, One of them, tragic accident. So the best of them passes away. The other 4 rally, decide to have a contest. Whoever commits the greatest deed by Christmas Eve in this person's name, but it has to be anonymous, ends up winning the pot. And the pot is 4 quarters in an old peanut jar. And what they end up doing is absolutely amazing. And even as I wrote it, and I know everybody who writes their stories, there's surprises, right? As you go along, you think you know where this thing's going to go, and it goes somewhere else. But I love the story. It was somewhat simplistic to me. There was a lot of complexity even within the storyboard. But I got it, packaged it. We ended up getting it published. And 2 years ago, I get a call saying, "Hey, you're going to sign a contract for an audio podcast drama," which is basically old time radio. So they're trying to bring back these stories and serialize them. So there's 6 episodes. You can download them for free on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. So I signed the contract. We're going to do it. They're going to end up recording the whole thing in Brooklyn. And they start telling me some of the voice actors that are on the deal. And one of them was Jasmine, on Broadway. Another one was playing, another show. It was amazing. And then the final one was Kathleen Turner,
Oh my
who
God.
ended up was the voice of the angel. So if, again, imagine that gruff, like raspy set, just amazing. And she came in. I think she was only there for 4 or 5 hours. Ended up doing her part. It gets released. Amazing. Again, I don't think anything of it. I'm back on another project, and my job's to write, right? Not look at the pot. So while it's boiling, recently got another call and said, "Hey, we're gonna film the movie, and it's going to take place either in February or March." So we're working through the contract now in New Milford, Connecticut. And they're negotiating with the city to actually keep the lights up and the decorations in the town square, right, so that they can film this, which I'm so excited, because my daughter, who's in musical theater, my youngest, obviously she'll have a walk on. We're not looking at a major role. I wouldn't do that. But that's one of the, I wrote the story, so I'd like to see my kid in the story. And it's something where I can kind of share my passion with hers and meld those two together. So I'm super excited about it. I really am.
That is amazing story. And these are things that if we didn't get on Zoom
Right.
and have this conversation, we would never know. I have been, trying to keep up with all my authors. I mean, literally, there's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of authors that have come through the doors of my shop and Girlfriend Weekend, trying to keep up with everybody. So
Right.
that's why we just recently made our page public. So you can now post one post a day about your book or news like you've got, because I can't keep up. And
Right.
I want everybody to know what's going on. That's the most exciting thing ever. And is it going to be called the Thursday night?
The Thursday Night Club. Yeah. And
That's
the
so
funny
cool.
part is, they end
So
up.
can I interrupt for a second? Sorry,
Please, Patricia.
Steve.
Sure.
I
Sure.
got bumped out there for some reason.
Yeah.
I got de-zoomed. What's the name of it? You were just starting to say.
The Thursday Night Club. So if you looked on Apple or whatever, you can download it right now. And again, it's free. There's 6 episodes, and they have all the commercials in it. But the thrill for me, is we write these things, and you don't know where they're going to go, right? And then all of a sudden you start listening to these voices of professional actors on Broadway. And I was somewhat fortunate because there's not a lot of upside to COVID, but these folks are out of work, so they ended up bringing in these voice actors that probably wouldn't have been in the project. And then the icing on the cake is Kathleen Turner. But it's a thrill to listen to something that you wrote in the sweltering heat, and you're talking about a snowstorm and Christmas time. So it's really cool. But again, for me, it's not just the story.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate it. But as you guys know, like, if I'm talking to Robert or Teresa, Patricia, Kathy, you guys come out with a book, of course I want to read the book. Of course I want to know about the story, but I also want to know what the backstory is. Like, I want to know how it came to be, because to me, there's just as much meat on the bone there, right? And if I look at a painting, I can appreciate the artwork in the painting, but I want to know what inspired the artist, right? What actually brought that story about, so. It's a joy to be able to share that.
That is the coolest thing ever. There's a wonderful book by Jim Trelease called Read all about it. You hear me say that all the time. But he was a newspaper man that became fascinated with the stories behind the stories.
Mm.
And so he told the story of like the man who wrote Where the Red Fern Grows. He was illiterate and he wrote all these books,
Wow.
but he couldn't write. You know, he had all these stories in him and he lived, you know, rurally and he married a school teacher and he was afraid she'd find the poorly written books. So he took the trunk filled with all of his books and took it out to the woods to burn it. And she stopped him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I have a secret." He goes, "I can't read or write very well, but I have these stories." And she goes, "Then let me help you." And
Wow.
so the first book they wrote, she helped her, was Where the Red Fern Grows. And then The
Wow.
Summer of the Monkeys. And there's stories about Beatrix Potter and all these favorite childhood tales. But that's what the Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys do. We have a conversation. We want to know the story behind the story. And
Right.
the more we learn, the more we want to read, the more we read, the better people we are. So
I
thank
agree.
you. I mean, what a wonderful message all of your work and your books are putting out into the world. And I love the fact that, you know, so many people go, "Well, how many books have you sold on blah, blah?" I don't pay any attention to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Good story is a good story is a good story.
Right.
I don't care who publishes it. It's got to be pretty well written. But, you know, I do not want that to stop anybody, and especially during this time of COVID. So how has this COVID experience been for you as a writer? I mean, what have you been?
I in the beginning it was absolutely joyous and you know, from a professional perspective, because you know, I get down in my little fort over here, right, and I start doing my thing. And I've never written a sequel in 30 years. I finally wrote a sequel for my 80s book, which was a lot of fun. I put out, you know, the menu, as you know, which is the December pick, and I'm working on a book called The Fort, which is what I call, you know, my office down here. But I spent 10 years working in a prison, and you know, back then, for me to write a book about the prison system, you would have actually felt all the negativity. You would have felt, you know what I mean, just that visceral, you know, type of emotion that some writers can. I've been, you know, separated long enough where I can actually create a setting, much like Shawshank Redemption or The Green Mile, and then place a human interest story in this. So I'm really, really excited about doing that. And I really had to wait a long time to be able to go back there and just use it as a setting versus, you know, here's the story. You're inside a prison and I'm here to scare you. That's not what it's about, right? So I'm working on that. I think what happened though with COVID is, you know, we need stimuli, right? So I'm a social person. I need to be out of the house. I need to be talking to people, listening to conversations. I work with a lot of young writers, or I should say new writers. And I tell them, you know, your job really is to be an observer, right? Of human behavior and conversation. I mean, if you listen to the ways people, you know, talk, or they have dialogue, they never finish a sentence, right? They talk over each other. There's all that. And if you can put that in a book and make it real, you know, and then that, you know, that's part of that escapism, right? And you know, one of the 4 components of that writing. So I think what happened is I ended up basically wringing out the sponge and got everything I could out of it. And then I sat there thinking, what am I going to write now? Right. So I wrote 2 books. I ended up writing a script. And then I said, I need to get out of, you know, get vaccinated, get out of this house and start living again so that I can write about it. You know, with younger people, I tell them, listen, you know, the mechanics are the mechanics, but it's really about telling a story where you can connect with somebody else. It's real, it's relatable. That's what somebody's going to get from you, right? You know, a lot of people come to me and they say, well, I want to write, or, you know, I love writing. And I tell them, you know, writing used to be what I do. It's actually who I am now, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
There's a huge difference in, you know, that's why I love to talk and you know, have these conversations with other authors, because they get it. It's not, people could talk about the money. Obviously, we all want to be successful, right? Whether it be the fame or the money, but to your point much earlier, Kathy, right? Whether or not I ever get paid again, the last day I draw a breath, I'm pretty sure I'm putting pen to paper, right? And I'm going to write a story, something that I want to share with people, because it's the way that I connect, and it's the way that, you know what I mean? I'm able to share whatever gifts I was given.
That reminds me of when Pat Conroy's mother was dying. He told me this story and he's put it in a lot of his speeches. He said, his mother looked up at me and she goes, "Don't tell me that you're going to put this in a book."
That's fantastic.
I was listening to a bunch of women talk one night when I was back up in Kansas, and I go, when they all got done, we were laughing, we were crying. I said, okay, I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to go in a book. What I
Right.
just heard tonight, because
Absolutely.
people were sharing their stories, but it's what makes us human.
Right.
You know, animals don't tell stories, but people do. And we're kind of locked out from sharing stories and conversation with each other. So for those that are not here tonight, you all just are missing out, because Steve has got some great stories. And
Thank you.
I'm glad we're taping this, because it's going to go up on our Kathy L. Murphy
Oh, good.
YouTube channel. And if you have a YouTube channel, I can share the video with you so you can put it there. But it's important for me to tell people to record and write your stories down, whether you write it down or record it. It's important because nobody can tell your story the way you can.
Right.
And sometimes people don't get it right. You know, they just look at the superficial. I've had people say, "Oh, those Pulpwood queens, they wear leopard and they're wild." And I because you wear leopard means you're wild. What stereotype is that? You know, and oh, you just drink all the time. I'm a diabetic. I can't have alcohol. So I just but people form these opinions.
Right.
And and I do dress different. I mean, I am an artist and I dress different. But has there ever been a misconception about you as a writer because you're also a police officer?
Yeah, there actually has been. So I'm 6 feet tall. I weigh 240 pounds, right? I'm going to give you, and this is just a funny example. I was asked to be a keynote speaker a few years ago. I'm in Cape Cod, and there's maybe 250 people in the room. And I take a seat in the back, and I'm waiting for this thing to get started. And people paid whatever it was, $25. You get a sandwich, you get lunch, and you get to listen to me speak, right? And out of the 250 people, it was me and this other gentleman who looked lost, right? So the rest were all women in the room. But I'm known for writing tearjerkers. So I write male perspective to a female audience, right? I'm an empath. And it's so funny because my background's in military and law enforcement. So when people see me, I present a certain way. So I turned to my right and I asked the lady next to me, I said, "Have you ever heard this gentleman speak?" And she said, "No." And I said, he's absolutely terrible. So she said, "What?" I said, I saw him, a few months ago. He's awful. So she said, "Oh my God," she turns to her friend, "We just paid this money. I hope lunch is good, blah, blah, blah." I end up getting announced and I stand up and I go to the podium. I turn around, we both start laughing, right? And I said, "Isn't it funny how you see me?" And I was very comfortable in that environment. I was very good at my job when I worked in the prison system, but we're multidimensional, right? So when I was a little boy, I was a sensitive little boy, right? Who, learned how to fight. And, I grew up with two maniac brothers. So there are different dimensions to us, right? But at first I write, a prison book. I write a book about the Gulf War, and I'm comfortable in that space, but I am drawn, and I mean from the soul, to write about stories that make people laugh or cry the same way my grandfather did. I mean, it's almost like I didn't pick it, like it picked me, right? And it took me a while, to get the courage to be able to write that way. But I write for a female audience. But one of my recent releases is called Dad, 3 Generations of Fathers, right? And people say, "Oh, do you think my husband would enjoy this?" Yeah, I also think you would, because I basically taken the curtain back and I'm showing you, just because I'm screaming at my son to get up and stop crying, and you know what I mean, like you just felt you know what I mean, like I'm trying to teach him certain things, doesn't mean that I'm not feeling what my wife's feeling, right? The roles, responsibilities, that whole thing. So I feel very comfortable in my skin. I think if God ever gave me a gift, it was that. And I've felt that way for a very long time. And I say this in the best way, right? I think as a writer, I don't care. I mean, I write for my children and their children, as long as I get that right. You know what I mean? And I'm answering to the good Lord, right? But outside of that, if you love my stuff, I couldn't be any more grateful. Really, I mean that, because my readership means everything to me. If you don't like it, then there are other writers in the world, right? But I need to write what I need to write and share my story with the world. But in the beginning, it was like all about the fights and the this or that. And then it became, I can't make the impact I want in this world with the time that I have. If I continue to write those stories, I have to write what comes from my soul.
Good for sure.
And
Yeah.
I am a firm believer in that if you can write a good story one way, it doesn't have to always be that way. You know, I once had my agent promise me that you'll never write fiction. I go, well, that actually is what I've been working on for a long time as a fiction.
Right.
And I did not promise, because I
Good for
feel
you.
like as a writer, we change, you know, and sometimes there's a story that's so important that you have to fictionalize it because you don't want to hurt anybody. And
Right.
so good for you. And I hope young people are hearing this. It makes me want to get you on our writers club to do a workshop for us.
I would love to, Kat. And I'll tell you, that's
We
one of
will
my
get that
passions.
set
Yeah.
up for this. We're going to be starting our writers club back up after our convention, our book
Yeah.
and film club too, right, Robert? We're going to start it back up after the convention. But right
That's
now,
fantastic.
we are our noses to the grindstone trying to get everybody to vote for our 2021 books. Go to our website on the December newsletter. There's a link where you just put in your email address and click Book of the Year, International Book of the Year, and Bonus Book of the Year. And you can vote for yourself. I've said it. I mean, there's not one president in the country that ever ran that didn't vote for themselves, right?
Right. That's true.
Come on, people. You are a member too. So we are very excited about the menu was great. It would be such a great, you know, I say this on all my books. I read visually. You know, I've got to read more of your books. I'm telling you, Mandy and and they keep coming. I got well over 1,000 books this year, and people go, "Have you read my book yet?"
Wow.
So, I mean, you know, it's just
Wow.
so Mandy's helping me now. We're reading them both, and we confer daily back and forth, you know, read this one, you read that one. And in fact, I just finished Sugar Baby by River Jordan. Five diamonds in the tiara. I'm telling you, I get so excited about my
Robert.
author's books, you know, with all of yours new ones coming out, and with the ones that we've done, because quite frankly, I've got a list this year I'm adding to our list called Lagniappe. Lagniappe is a wonderful term, comes from Louisiana, of giving a little something extra. I have listed a bunch of books, and a lot of them are by famous people, but they're too important not to skip.
Right.
But our sole purpose is help first book authors. So I've got a whole bunch of books that I'm going to list at the end that if you're as a voracious reader as me, please check out these books, because people like Richard Powers, who wrote The Overstory and The Bewilderment. Oh my gosh, he's famous. He's won the National Book Award, Pulitzer, probably everything. But I never heard of him.
Mhm.
So what my job is for you, Steve, is to let everybody know you've been writing for 30 years. You have how many books?
17.
17 books. And how can we get in contact with you or get those books?
So I'm on, Facebook. I'm very approachable. I'm on all that, social media, and, for all the downside there is for social media, at least for writers, again, it's our way to connect, right, with readers. And,
Sure.
the kids I went to kindergarten with wouldn't know I'm writing if it wasn't for, Facebook, right? So obviously today, my stuff is available in all stores, but, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, iBooks, you can get, everything there. StephenManchester.com is my website. And I love connecting with people. I really do. We just did a Christmas bazaar locally, and I love to, and I think more people showed up with books that they'd had for years just for me to sign the books. But I love having those conversations because, as you guys know, right, this can be really, really neurotic, right? So you're up in your head and you're spending months and months, putting this thing out and developing these characters and creating a world unto yourself. So when I speak to somebody who's read one of my books, I don't want to hear, oh, I thought the book was great, or it's not about the praise. It's about, what'd you get from it? What was the connection? Was it what I intended? You know what I mean? And it's that second half of the discussion, that second half of the conversation. So I love it. And I tell all readers, reach out to me, and especially newer writers, right? If there's any way that I can help somebody, I'm there to do that as well. I mean, this is not an easy path, as we all know, right? It shouldn't be terrible. I mean, it should be something that that you love to do. But I tell people all the time, like, listen, if you were never to see your book in print, your story, right, would you still write it? The answer has to be yes, right? I mean, it absolutely has to be yes. I mean, you have to have that type of passion. So I think when we work with younger writers and newer writers, it's more about even being a cheerleader, right? And trying to inspire them to keep going, right? It's a tough business.
Well, that's exactly why we started the Writers Club. We wanted our authors who are brilliant. You know, every one of my authors I pick is 5 diamonds in my Pulpwood Queen Tiara. There's no bad reviews from me.
That's awesome.
I want to pick the best of the best. So why couldn't they mentor? I think about
Absolutely.
late great Pat Conroy and Leela Meacham, who reached out to authors, young authors that called them up and said, could I help you with that book?
Oh, wow.
I mean,
That's
Karen Harrington
amazing.
said, I'll never forget, Pat Conroy said, I loved your book. I bought it. I would like to help you. I mean, just that helping somebody is, you know, just that's what it's all about. And, you know, we try to be in service with each other and we think we're doing a good thing, but really what we're doing is something for ourselves.
Right.
You know, by you being so generous and everything, it's making your life rich, you know.
I agree. I mean, sometimes it feels selfish, right, to be able to do that type of stuff. But I think it's a blessing. I think if you've had any success at all, right, if you're not giving back, then there's a problem there, right? Because I look back, you know, 30 years ago, what I wouldn't have given just for some information, not I need you to do this for me or that. I'm not looking for that, but for some information, right? To say, here's the next rock that you should step on. This is what worked for me. So it's time, right? Which is obviously, you know, a precious commodity for us, but you have to give some of it away. You do, or the entire, you know, you're going to take the walk alone. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, every author that I've asked to do a workshop for the Writers Club has said yes. And if any of you are listening and want to do that, I mean, TK, yours will go down in history as the most hilarious workshop we've ever had. I laughed so hard. I love TK Gore. I love her. I love all of you, but she is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I hope you'll reach out to Mandy and I and say, hey, I'd love to do a writer's workshop.
Absolutely.
I think it's fabulous because the more we give, the more we get. It comes back to you so many ways, you know. So thank you, Steve. And I hope that when you're on our blog this week, which is the Pulpwood Queen presents her picks, which is your week to showcase. I hope somewhere this week you'll list all your books that you've got. I don't know if you can copy and paste those, but I would like to know what all of them are. And I would also like to know the link to listen to that podcast for that.
Yes, I'll do that as well. Yeah.
Because I love radio programs. You remember what's the guy from up in is he Wisconsin? He had it for years. Oh my goodness, why can't I?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Is it Minnesota or Wisconsin? Up north.
Prairie Home Companion.
The Prairie Home Companion. Oh my God, I used to love to watch that. Then they made a movie about it. I tell you, I love old time radio.
I do too.
I wish they bring it back because, man, what's on the radio in my car these days is scary.
That's true.
I just have to put my CDs in and go on. But that would be fantastic. And you're going to do a contest this week. Are you going to do that contest?
Yeah, I'd love to give away a couple, you know, signed copies of the menu. The one thing I will say about the menu is, you know, we've won a couple of book festivals with it, which is, you know, which is good. I mean, it helps to broaden the audience, but we ended up giving away hundreds and hundreds of books to hospice up in New England, right? So the book is based on not only just never feeling alone, but the premise of the story was, you know, everybody talks about life and afterlife, right? This story actually entertains pre-life. And if the spirit is eternal, right? What if, and it's a big what if, right? We're all writers here. What if you were able to pick your life from a menu? But whatever you chose, you have to finish. You don't remember what the selections were. And the difficult part of that is, you know, whoever you're sharing your life with or the people that come in and out of your life are picking from their own menus, right? Things that you don't understand, or, you know, and it drives you nuts and, you know, the whole frustration. But I love this book. It's near and dear to me because it's helped me to connect with a lot of people. And the idea, the original idea of the book was trying to ease my children's worry about death, right? And I said, listen, we have a baby that's born in the family. Everybody celebrates. There's balloons, all kinds of, And my dad passes away after 72 years, and there's this deep grieving, right? Which, it's the process. But if anybody should have been celebrated, right, for 72 years of these accomplishments and all the things, the people that he touched throughout his life. So for me, it's not a religious work, but it's a book of, on faith and real spiritual, right? And it's got that universal message. But my thing is, if you could pick it and then you come here, I love the book because even the characters who passed away in the book remain characters, right? So there's that eternal connection, right? And it's almost like feeling like you've met somebody before, you've ever actually met them.
All the time. That's
right.
So funny you'd say that.
Yeah.
That just happened to me this week. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I'd love to give away a few copies
books
of that.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the rules for this contest going to be?
I think what we'll do, Kathy, right, is just ask people if you could pick from your menu, right? What would you have chosen? And there's the antithesis to that, right? So within the book, and God has a great sense of humor in this book, right? So as Finn is ordering his life, he says, I want courage. I definitely want courage. And God says, yeah, you can have it, but you need to take fear. Thinks about it. Yeah, I'll accept that. And then as he's ordering down the line, he finally hands the menu back and says, I can't have any of the good without the bad, can I? God smiles and says, pretty clever design, don't you think? He said, I want to experience all of it. All of it. The joy, the pain, the suffering, all of it. I want to experience everything. And then God begins, all right, so what's your purpose? He also asks him, what will your agenda be? The spirit doesn't have agenda, right? And then what happens is, in the very, very early in the book, we break away from all these prejudices, all these, you know what I mean? Like, we're born to think that people, fit within these molds, right? And the way that God sees this spirit is, it's all about love, right? And you're going to return home to me after it's over. So there is no end. There is no end to any of this, right?
I love it. I love that message.
That's great.
It's great. And hopefully everybody listening to this will run and order online or go to your nearest bookstore and get the menu by Steve Manchester. And we'll just have to Google or go on the blog and see how many other books we're missing out on. It's just like when you read somebody you like, I always go back and read their other books. It's getting a little hard now.
Right.
I'm getting so many books. I mean, it's I'm not complaining because I'm a voracious reader, but I can usually read a book a day if I set my mind to it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've read over 365 books, I bet you, this year. Yep. Now, I didn't read a book a day. I usually binge read, like on Sundays, I'll read 3. People go, how do you read 3 books? And I go, I'm a fast reader. But also, the more you read, the faster. But I always go back and look at it again if I pick the author, because names escape me. I'm one of those
for
people.
sure.
I'm not like some people, they can remember all the characters' names. I can remember the story, but I get a little, sometimes I can't remember my own name. I've introduced myself with my former married name, I don't know how many times. I mean, you do this for 25 years, you go, oh no. And people look at you, my name's not Kathy Patrick, it's Kathy Murphy. And they go, what? And I go, I'm sorry, I said it for 25 years. It's hard to break. So, but I am definitely a Murphy. So anyway, well, if there's one word of advice you want to give out to the world, because we're hoping everybody all over the world's listening to this taping when we put it up on the YouTube channel, what is something that you have learned that you didn't know when you started that has just been invaluable to you?
From a personal perspective, when I was very young, I respected brawn, right? Like strength. And then I grew a little bit older, and then I respected intelligence, right? And as I become hopefully a little wiser, right? From here to the end, for me, will be kindness. And I respect kindness more than anything else in the world. And I think today we see less and less of it for a lot of different reasons, right? But from a personal perspective, it's definitely that, right? The things that I thought was important back then, or were important, I don't think so anymore. Like it's, even the things that were huge to me, now it just, you shrink it down, right? And within my family, I mean, love's a given, right? Respect is earned, but outside of all of that, it's about being kind, and I expect that from my children as well.
Good for you. That's a great lesson. Okay, I'm going to open it up. If any of you guys have any questions on his writing process or anything, let's ask him now while we have him here live and see what wonderful story he's going to share. Anybody want to start?
Yeah, I have a question, Steve. So of your body of work today, if you could only choose one book for your children to read, what would you choose?
Wow, that's a great question, Robert. That's a tough question, but it's a fantastic question. I would have to say The Menu, and I'm not saying that because I'm here tonight. I'm saying that because it's my faith, right? And my faith has sustained me through 10 years behind a prison wall, working, not living there, right? I've gone to combat. So it's about faith. It's about feeling like, I'm not alone and having that spiritual connection, right? So, and I don't care what religion you are. People get really busy in the details, right? About dogma and whatnot. It's about having, that connection beyond that. So I would have to say The Menu. Thank you for that question.
Boy, I'm glad I picked that book.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm curious as to what your process is and how it has evolved from when you first began writing.
Wow.
Do you write every day?
Another great question. So in the beginning, I was everything but the kitchen sink, right? If you talk to any of my publishers, incredibly frustrating, right? Like I throw everything down, and I ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Lou Aronica, who was with Avon and then Bantam Dell. He runs a shop called the Story Plan, and signed a multi-deal with him. But he basically taught me how to storyboard. And what that's done, Patricia, right, is it's just built-in efficiencies. I'd like to think it's made me a better writer, but I think really what it's done is, it would take me 2 years to write a novel, where it now takes me 6 to 9 months, right? So my whole deal is, if I can, if I get super excited, Robert and I are out at dinner and, we're talking about an idea, and I'm like so pumped up, I want to talk about this book. There's my plot, right? In 2 or 3 sentences. From there, I think the reason I've had as much success as I have and built my readership is all in the character development. It's all about the characters for me. And I have to believe the story before I put it down on paper. You know what I mean? So the way things have evolved for me is every time, and I'm thinking this is probably true for most of you, I'm still surprised when I can finish a book, right? I mean, it's still incredibly challenging. It's not, I don't think it's ever going to be easy. The first 20 minutes, every time I'm at my laptop, it's torture, absolute torment. Once you get the momentum going and you get that train out of the station, right? There's no better place in the world, right? So for me, it's trusting the process. It's understanding that I've been at it long enough. I've devoted myself to this craft. The difference today, though, is I also understand it as a discipline, right? So it's all about seat time. I don't write on Saturdays and Sundays. My family comes first, but I do put in time every day. Every day. It's a discipline. I mean, you have to, and the only way, I don't think you can ever perfect it, but practice makes you better, right? And my job is not to compete against any of the authors here tonight or any authors that are out there. My job is to compete against me. And I need the next book that I write to be better than the one that came before it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the challenge that I put onto myself. So I would have to say the main thing, and I know I've, gone all the way around this question to answer it, but it's the storyboard. It's about having an outline, not an 8th grade outline where all these restrictions are here, but something where I know where the end's going to be, or I think I know where the end's going to be, and I'm going to kind of move toward that goal. Where before it was, I have no idea. So I'd be going down the highway. I take a right, into the gully, through the woods. I'd end up back on the highway. So the storyboard of that real loose outline that keeps me honest with myself has helped me tremendously. Thank you for that question.
Well, that's good. That's good information.
Thank you.
Yes, I may be an incurable pantser, because I would I would love to be able to storyboard, but I keep thinking about, doesn't it take as much time to figure out the whole plot of a book as it does if you're writing towards that? And so I don't know that my question is, can you get into the weeds a little bit with how you know, so whatever period of time that you're doing the storyboarding,
Hmm.
do you, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Time for your medication?
No, usually with the
my
storyboarding questions
Yeah.
comes a bell or a whistle.
So do you do like, okay, I think I know what the end is going to be and the middle, and then I don't know
Right.
anything else. I have to write my way into the characters
Yeah,
and
it's
Yeah.
and I've done it both ways, Teresa. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I truly don't. For me, I you know, for the last 12 years, I've put out a book a year, right? And again, I don't want it to be something which was lesser. You know, it's not a quantity thing for me. It's just I'm so passionate about it. I'm driven to write. It's what I love to do. So being able to do the storyboard, again, I don't spend months and months on the storyboard. I have
Mhm.
this loose outline, and I'll give you an example. I read a book called Ashes. Two brothers, middle-aged. They've been estranged for 15 years. The only thing they hate more than themselves is their father. Their father's the greatest villain I've ever written. Ashes is their father in a vase, who leaves them a letter saying, I need you to spread my ashes in Seattle, Washington. So I need you to take me from Salem, Massachusetts to Seattle, Washington. So I do a 6-day road trip. And the storyboard for me was, all right, I have the two brothers, they're going to meet at this point. They get in a car, they rent this car. I want the reader to feel like he or she is in the backseat listening to this banter. And you know, when people say, oh my God, I hate my family, you don't hate your family, right? These are the people that know you, right? So you may not like them, but, and I take them across the country, but by storyboarding or creating this outline and saying at the end, this is exactly what's going to happen, at least from the beginning, without having that finish line for me, I'm writing in the dark. Like, I don't, like, where am I heading? So by picking that, I'm able to say, all right, they're going to go to Pennsylvania. They go to a restaurant. I wish I'd had the time to do this road trip. Instead, I did Google Earth. I ended up going to AAA. I got the trip tick, right?
Yeah.
And then I went online and I said, listen, if they're going to stay in this hotel, let me pull up everything I can about this hotel. You can literally go into the lobby, right? And take a look at the color of the cushions, right? So
Yeah.
I create that like you're actually sitting there, but the storyboard helped me to quicken the pace. I'm not sure it would have been a different book in the end if I didn't storyboard, but it would have taken me much longer to get there.
Yeah. And Steve, I bet even though you have this storyboard and it helps you stay very, focused and organized on your path, I'm sure you still deviate.
Oh my God, yeah.
You're writing a character and one character says something to another character and you go, what?
Yeah.
What? I didn't know he was going to say that.
Absolutely.
Or I didn't know he was going to go there. And
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, Patricia, I think everybody on the Zoom session is just as much a puzzle maker as they are a writer, right? So we write these, you write this passage, which is like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever written, right? It's poetic. I mean, I don't know if the sun was coming up, I was inspired, right? The whole muse thing, whatever. And then I created another one, then I created another one. In the end, I'm putting these all together and then I'm paying extra attention to the segues and transitions between chapters and whatnot. And this is what I try to teach newer writers, that it's not a linear process. I don't care who you are. I don't know anybody who writes from point A to point Z. I mean, I know Kerouac did, and there was, certain writers who would talk about, staying up for, 80 hours and writing their story. And that's a kind of a cool concept. But for me, I'm in the middle of a rain delay at Fenway Park, right? Watching the Boston Red Sox. I know in my next book, there's going to be a snowstorm. I'm going to write the snowstorm. And I'm going to take that scene and I'm going to put it where it belongs. And it may mix and match. In the end, according to the storyboard, the end has to be the end. The beginning has to be the beginning. But I can move pieces around to make that work.
Sure. Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's not. Yeah. I mean, there are times, I'm telling you, I wrote a book called The Rockin' Ship. My grandfather, Swamp Yankee, right? I have these three characters. All of a sudden, they meet this man, Herbert Manchester, who's my grandfather. He's deceased. He died when I was 12. The man walked on water for me, right? He sells this kid a pigeon. And if you know anything about pigeons, they always fly back to the coop that they were born in. They're monogamous birds. They're amazing, amazing birds. The old man keeps selling this kid the same bird. So the bird leaves his coop, he flies back to the old man's coop, but the old man's keeping the money. Finally, the grandfather shows up and says, and he gives the old man the money. They have a beer together. I spent so much time on this old timer, this neighbor, because he was Herbert Manchester. He was my grandfather in the overalls and stuff. And then I realized, no. I'm on a side road and I need to get back on the main road and tell this story. So I agree with you. And it's a lot of fun. It is. It's a lot of fun when characters pop up. The last impression I want to give anybody, even who's watching this recording later, I'm not a robot. I mean, there are times where I think I know what's going to happen and it doesn't. And that's the magic, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, a good story should feel like it's being told to you, right? And you're putting it down. It's like, I don't know if you've seen that movie Finding Forrester with Sean Connery, and he's teaching the kid, and he says to the kids at the typewriter, right? And he's stunned. And he said, "What's the problem?" He says, "Well, I'm thinking." "Well, there's your problem. Don't think." Right.
Yeah.
Tell the story you meant to tell.
I have to ask you, on the end of Ashes, did it end the way you had it in your storyboard?
Very, very close. I mean, I had to tweak. There were some nuances that I had to tweak, and I didn't want this to be one of those Hallmark endings with the big sloppy hug at the end, right? And I have done that in some of my works, but with this, I had to stay true to form, right, with the two brothers. What I love about that story is the fort, which I'm working on now. One of the brothers appears in this book, right, because he's a correction officer. So I love doing that multiverse thing too. I love reappearing characters. I mean, I wrote a story where Ashes, right? We're talking about Ashes, the road trip in Salem, Massachusetts. They meet an elderly lady with her grandson who's disabled, and it's Brian and Mama from Goodnight Brian. So if you're one of my readers and you've read that, you're like, oh my God, they just walked past Mama who said hi to him.
Oh,
and then they get out to Montana and there's a flat tire. They end up in a gulch. Who shows up as Hank McCarthy from the rocking chair and says, "Listen, we're going to try to winch you out. If I can't get you, I'll call my boy George." So my readers will actually write to me and say, "Oh my," like, I love that because, yeah, why not? I mean, it's my universe, right?
It's
So
an inside, it's a reader's inside kind of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I call it's like a wink, right? It's almost like a wink to the reader. And if you haven't read my stuff, that's cool too, right? You wouldn't know any different. But if you had, it's a little Easter egg, right?
Yeah, that's very cool.
That's very cool and unique.
Yeah.
Very unique.
I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to go, but I'm so glad that I was able to snatch this time.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you.
This has been really great.
Thank you.
And I'll definitely be looking up the Thursday Night Club and your books, Stephen.
Thanks. I'll send the link over. Thank you so much, Patricia. I appreciate it.
Okay, that's great. Kathy, TK, Robert, nice to see everybody.
We'll see you down the road.
Bye for now.
Bye.
It's about that time, you all. We're getting close.
Kathy, I'm going to do something really obnoxious and read the first paragraph of the first chapter of the menu.
I love when you do this. I love it.
Gift.
It's not obnoxious at all. Go ahead.
It was eternal dawn. Two silhouettes stood in the soft light of a cloud. Through the veil of fog, the taller shadow handed the other a thin book and patted him on the shoulder. The gold embossed burgundy cover was the approximate size of a menu. Amid the faint sound of birds chirping and a whistling wind, the silhouettes remained faceless. Lovely beginning. I'm just obsessed with good beginnings. And I love a very simple first sentence.
Right.
It was eternal dawn. And that's lovely.
Thank you.
There's a lyrical quality to your work, which you would, as you said earlier, from a prejudicial perspective, when you see a big fellow like yourself, you're not going to be lyrical.
Right. I tell you, Robert, that's a gift. Thank you so much for reading that. And the folks who know me the best, and I'm obviously, I'm completely transparent tonight, but my greatest love when I look at writing is poetry. And within my books, I always include 1, 2, or 3 poems, right? Definitely 1, sometimes 2. It's hard to make characters in every book, a poet, right? But poetry for me is, if you can land it, right, is, it would take me 40,000 words to explain something I can in 1 poem, right, to elicit that type of emotion. So I've always believed that a good writer can make, a reader think, but a great writer makes a reader feel, right? And it's not walking away with a vocabulary lesson. It's walking away with a feeling that, oh my God, it's like, you know, if the four of us went out to a movie and we walked out of the place and we're all crying, right? Because this thing was an amazing tearjerker. And somebody said, well, what did they say in the movie? I have no idea, but it blew me away and it made me feel human and it connected me to the folks that I was with.
Well, I think that
Oh, that's cool.
based on the premise of the menu, you know, when you have an opportunity to choose, I mean, I think that any writer would choose to feel everything.
Right.
You would have to, you know.
I agree.
There's this lovely moment in Michael Cunningham's novel, the one with Pulitzer, called The Hours.
Mhm.
And the writer, who's at the end of his life, is telling his best friend Clarissa, you know, how, you know, he felt that he had failed, but, you know, all that he ever wanted to do is feel everything that there was to feel and to know all the words and to make everybody feel what he felt.
Wow.
You know, and I think that that's what we want to do.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, it's, you know, it happens at a much deeper level, right? It's not like, for me, some of the best work I've ever read and will probably ever read is unpublished, right? And because of, you know, there are people that aren't going to wait, they're not going to sit at the table long enough to get that winning hand, right? So this is a brutal business. But if you take the business away from it and you look at the purity of the writing, right? Like I would, you know, if we could all get together at a conference and talk about accolades, I would actually love to sit in a circle and you know, develop a story together, right? And have that type of, that creative moment. I'm more into the process than I am the finished product. I'm more into being able to create that. And to me, that, I think that's what the gift is. And, you know, when I, you know, I go to my knees in prayer, I thank God that I'm able to create something that hopefully is something positive that I can push back into the world.
This has been a
Absolutely.
profound night, y'all. I'm just like speechless on some of these beautiful words that you guys are sharing with us. Fantastic. So, wow. TK, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here.
She was a spectacular poet herself.
Really?
Oh, yes.
That's,
She is. She shared a poem with us not too
Yeah.
long ago.
It was at during film club when we were discussing To Kill a Mockingbird.
oh, wow.
Right. Yes, you'll have to go back and watch that on
Yes, I will. Actually, I'm
our
going to
YouTube
put a note
channel,
down there
so-
too. Thank you. Thank you, Robert, for that tip.
I've always loved poetry, and one of my I think biggest accolades was I got to introduce the National Poet Laureate at a book festival.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was just so, and he was fabulous. And I try to include a poetry book every year, but I didn't get any this year. So if you're poets out there, make sure, you know, we read books from all genres. And we read both men and women's books, and we read books from around the world. So stop with the Southern books and give me the worldview books. I don't care where books are set. I just want a story I haven't heard before. And thank you for sharing yours, Steve. I'm
Thank
looking
you.
forward to, I mean, where do you see this is going to go? What do you think is going to happen next?
Within my writing career, yeah, I think that I'm going to continue on. So the menu, I was in one of the hospice groups with the volunteers and caregivers, and there was a wonderful lady who said, listen, I really love the book. The only problem in the book is everybody's nice. And at the beginning of the book, God says that, you know, he's telling the, you know, the protagonist, you have free will. So you can or do not have to pick a conscience. Would you consider, you know, having a character that doesn't have a conscience? And therein lies the birth of the fort, right? So if I open it the same way as the menu, like, so if the menu is the yin and the fort is the yang, if we're going to talk about redemption and recrimination, and we're going to talk about grace and mercy, why don't we do it from a prison, right? And maybe all the good guys aren't good guys, and maybe all the bad guys aren't bad guys, but just by her saying that one thing, I literally got goosebumps, and I was like, here we go. There's another year of my life, right? So I'm going to have to write this story. So for me, it's the fort. Continue to promote Dad. That just came out. It actually won the Paris Book Festival, which I'm super excited about. The good news is, you know, because of COVID, my wife and I will be celebrating at McDonald's. I think they have the 2 for $6 right now. because you can't fly to Paris.
Well, that this has all just been so enlightening. I love hearing everything about the story behind the story. I wish we could do this more. I mean, it's hard to get everybody here on Tuesday nights. I know people's lives are busy, but it's really important, I think, that we share our stories with each
I
other.
agree.
I applaud you. I will end with one thing. As Robert, I learned once, he's one of our authors that has a passion for film, as I do. Film is storytelling too, and screenplays and things. And I recently watched a film, and I never experienced this quite like this before, but I watched the Netflix series on the Versace murder, and I knew the story. I knew that a kid killed him, but it was the first time ever I had seen the story play out where towards the end of the show, they went back to the young boy as a child. And this is what has always bothered me about people that do evil things. Nobody ever tells their story. So I think that will be great for you to have this in there, because people that are in prison, there was a wonderful book years ago about men on death row, and this person interviewed them about how did they get from being born to on death row, and the stories of what happened to them when they were children, and the story what happened to this boy when he was a child, and something happens and people snap. It was the first time I'd ever seen it addressed, so I'm really looking forward to reading that book, because I think you think about the famous nun who went to the prisons, and they did a movie about her. But what movie would you say that you watched that you can't ever get out of your mind, that sticks with you? This Versace thing, I just can't get it out of my mind about all the characters in it. Is there one for you?
Yeah, and I hate to say this because it's so commercial, but Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
That
it was so well told.
That was a
know.
short story in his book, Four Seasons,
Right.
Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption.
Right.
And I think it's one of the best stories he ever wrote.
I agree.
And the way the movie was done it's very powerful. So
Yeah, Frank Darabont. I mean, it was a great tag team there, but yeah, it was really profound for me, because I came, and I'm being honest now, right? You talk about prejudice. I worked there for 10 years, with 1,400 inmates who were, a lot of them were violent. So to be in that environment with a badge, right, and have to work that type of stuff, and then being removed for 20 years and thinking about it from a human perspective, it's very different now, right? Like, I see things very different, and I do believe that there is evil in the world. I've witnessed it and I've experienced it. There are people that aren't wired right, believe me when I tell you that. But there are also people who, were victims of, some horrific things, right, that ended up telling their stories. So we'll see how it turns out, but I'll definitely keep you guys in the loop.
that's a great choice. You guys have one you want to share before we go?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, lately I've been thinking about a film that came out some time ago called Pleasantville.
Yes.
And
Yes,
it's
I saw
where
that.
a modern family sort of swept up into Pleasantville. They go from a world of color into a world of black and white where everything seems perfect. And then it's sort of like, I don't know, there's sort of this Garden of Eden moment where people are introduced to worldliness. And there's this moment where it starts to rain, and the mother, the black and white washes off her cheek, and you see the color beneath, and it's just this, it's this knowing that, it's very poetic, and you have to know, to fully live a fulfilled life, it can't all be good,
Right.
To
there has
really
to be
understand sheer joy, you have to have sheer
loss
misery. Yeah.
and passion, and you have to be flawed. You have to be flawed to live a fulfilled life, and I think that that's what makes writing sing, is when people are able to see themselves in your characters.
Absolutely. How about you,
Oh,
TJ?
and just
Okay.
quick, and so there's this. So they there's a singer named Fiona Apple who did a cover of the Beatles song Across the Universe, and I'm obsessed with it.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's that whole soundtrack of Across the Universe is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time, and a great film too, by the way.
Well, Fiona Apple.
Fiona Apple.
Fiona,
Across
thank
the
you, Rob.
Universe. And it
Okay.
makes me weepy.
It slays you. And what about you, TK? Is there a movie that just you
Well,
can't?
I love both of those movies that you mentioned, but I was thinking, all right, what's some profound movie that's affected me? But my favorite movie of all times is As Good as It Gets.
Oh yeah,
It's a great
With
film.
that's a great film.
Jack Nicholson and what's her name?
Helen Hunt.
Yes,
Helen Hunt.
Hunt.
I'm gonna have to watch.
Ellen Hunt.
On Twister, yeah.
And
That's
I love that movie so much that I actually found the script to it and studied it because
deal.
it was fabulous. Yeah, and I love to watch it. It makes me laugh every time, and his character was so right on. With the OCD writer.
Right.
That just, and it just didn't want any kind of relationships. He just wanted his eggs and bacon just like he wanted it.
right.
And so because of that, he got involved in this waitress's life and changed her life, and she changed his life. And it was just a great movie.
That is a great movie.
I ask it because we're going to be starting the book and film club back up after Girlfriend Weekend. So, all of these are great choices and we want to share them. And I'm going to mention two others that haunt me to this day. Memoirs of a Geisha, because I can't believe that was written by a man. And White Tiger, which is going to be on my reading list as a little something extra. And I recently saw the movie, which made me read the book. And it scared the living daylights out of me. I'm going to have to tell you. So you guys, thank you so much for this wonderful night. It was very enlightening and I'm inspired. I want to get out and write some more, and I want to share your, everybody watch the Pulpwood Queen Presents blog, because Stephen's going to be blogging all week. We're going to hear more about his books, more about his radio podcast thing that's coming up, and we look forward to everything that you've got coming up in the future, and we'll see you at our book club convention.
I'll be there. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, TK.
Night, you all, and
Awesome. Thank
it's
you.
all about
Thank you, sir.
the story. You know it. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Howdy.
Thank
Bye.
you, Stephen.
Bye-bye. Thank you.